Hi there, I'm Lillian. Welcome to my channel. Here I talk about what it's like to wake up one day and find yourself in a real-life nightmare. You discover you're married to a covert narcissist. I talk about how I was baited through love bombing, trapped by a trauma bond, and stuck in blindness, unable to tell the difference between abuse and love for 34 years. Here, I share my journey of how healing my feminine heart was the key to everything. I learned how to understand God's word through a feminine lens instead of a masculine one. I learned to understand myself better and why I struggled with self-confidence and why predators seemed always to be drawn to me. But the most significant revelation was that a healed feminine heart can drive away darkness with light. If you're interested in going deeper into the content I've shared today, or if you're ready to begin your healing journey, I've created a PDF that goes along with this playlist to help you do that. I respond to emails the last week of every month if you would like support as you make your way, or to celebrate any healing you're experiencing on your journey. I would love to hear from you. There's an email link in the description box. Today, I want to talk about some specific methods of attack that a wolf in sheep's clothing will attempt to play in order to get narcissistic supply from his wife, and how my arsenal of weapons were birthed inside me and grown. The first step was to build my arsenal with truth. I intentionally began with the definitions of discretion, grace, and presence. In Philippians 4:8, God says to meditate on whatever is true, to dwell on that. It's true to God that I'm precious and of great worth to him. 1 Peter 3, right? He knew it, but I did not. Affirming what I did not feel was self-deception. It's nothing more than a positive affirmation at that point. Remember, there's two parts to the whole truth. There's knowing and believing. John 6:69 and 1 John 4:16. There's academic believing, choosing to trust, and then there's also the feeling of knowing. So just memorizing scripture alone does not heal you when you're brokenhearted from trauma. The Holy Spirit uses scripture like the sword that it is in the process of healing all of us. But he uses it differently for those who are experiencing the intimate abuse of warfare in their own homes from a man. The Lord showed me I was gullible and naive. Memorizing 2 Timothy 3:6 verses 6 through 7 wouldn't do anything to help me. It was truth. I was gullible and naive, and now I saw it. That was the first side of the double-edged sword that cuts so deeply. The other side was seeing the opposite of gullible and naive, and that was when the healing started. That's when God uses a much finer, sharpened tool like a scalpel. When God put me into that contrite position, I had to not just see what I was, but also accept the truth of what I lacked. Discretion, grace, and presence are the opposite of gullible naivety and the fulfillment of 1 Peter 3:4. That's how I knew to start with the definitions of discretion, grace, and presence, not affirming them. Affirmations are actually quite dangerous, and if you're not careful, you'll find yourself deceived by the whole law of attraction sham. So I researched the definitions, and my definitions ended up being discretion, behaving or speaking in a way that avoids causing offense or revealing private information. Grace, kindness and warm courtesy, tact and propriety. And presence, paying attention, getting curious, intentional focus. You can use the wording that fits for you best. In fact, I ended up rewriting and reworking these about 4 or 5 times as I lived through this season. It was about a year. The second step in warfare is using that arsenal of truth in fearless faith. You don't activate it or affirm anything. Positive thinking or an affirmation would sound like, I am discreet, or I will be discreet today. That's gaslighting yourself because you're not those things. And you can't see into the future. The idea of fake it until you make it is a narcissistic notion. It's disingenuous and self-deceptive. It's dangerous to your soul and your mind. So instead, use all your strength to put the raw materials into your heart, soul, and mind, Luke 10:27. And the Holy Spirit activates the appropriate embodiment for you. He gives you the right tool at the right time, sometimes more discretion, sometimes graciousness, sometimes more presence. That's the fearless faith that hopes in God. That's where He wants your hope, not in marriage as a wife, but as a true daughter doing what is right. 1 Peter 3:6. It's your faith in God and His power for healing that makes you a true daughter. Mark 5:30. In fact, it's only faith in your relationship with God and His power, not submission in the role of a wife in marriage. Before I talk about these two games, there's 4 truths that you have to be willing to accept. First, a covert narcissist orients from his estrogen. Humans have both estrogen and testosterone. We just have them in opposite percentages. A man has way more testosterone and a woman has way more estrogen. God gave every human the free will to orient from our lesser or greater hormone. The essence of toxic masculinity is a man that doesn't appropriately handle the significant masculine power that's imbued in his testosterone. He's rewiring his brain in the opposite way God created him to be. You're not going to change him. No amount of prayer is going to get God to take away your husband's free choice. The second thing is that a covert narcissist never plays only one card against you. There's always overlap because they use several tactics at the same time. So resist the temptation to look for single markers of behaviors or traits. That's why I always suggest pulling away or leaning back so that you can feel patterns. Third, if you haven't healed or at least started, your naivety is keeping you blind because you think you're living a normal life. And you think that your marriage is normal and just has lots of conflicts. We went to this Christian marriage conference that told me the reason we were so conflicted is because we were both woodpeckers, instead of how it is with most couples, which is a turtle and a woodpecker. And that might be true if you're a sheep married to another sheep. But the reality is that I really wasn't in a marriage at all. I thought I was. God tells us in 2 Corinthians 6 that we can't be equally yoked. Not if you're a sheep and he's a wolf. You have different fathers. God won't build a one-flesh relationship between light and darkness. You will never be equally yoked. You're married to a domestic terrorist who is using a Christian marriage as a front to hide the intimate abuse that you're experiencing. Your gullibility has been limiting your view to a perspective that's only in the natural realm. You're at a great disadvantage because you can't see that his strategies are supernatural. Fourth, any kind of marriage problem can be solved by two people that are healthy when a marriage is made up of two imperfect sheep. Even though there's dysfunction and even though there's maybe significant difficulties and hardships, it's still a one-flesh union of light with light. The fact that the problems in your marriage always escalate into toxic conflicts and you need increasing kinds of resolutions, that's suspicious. When problems morph into conflicts that speedily descend into high conflict, and it happens on the regular, That's the proof. It's not iron sharpening iron, which is what I thought. Just a super duper highly conflicted to the point of me being damaged in every conflict that I thought our marriage was normal. I didn't believe that it was spiritual warfare with evil, that there was actually a darkness trying to conquer my light. Neither did Job. He needed the proof of how real evil was and how evil is. One commentator writes, Job has been led to see the multifarious character of God's vast creation, its unfathomable fusion of beauty and cruelty, and through his experience, he has come to understand the incommensurability between his human notions of right and wrong and the structure of reality. Job said, I've heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore, I abhor myself and repent. Job wasn't sinning. He was righteous. God defined that at the beginning of the book. But what Job needed to see clearer was the reality of the evil inhabiting fallen earth and his own thinking comparatively to God's pure holiness. Job wasn't repenting of anything he did wrong. He was repenting for merely having a human mind. There's a lyric to a song from Hollian. The song is called In Awe. She says, I can't move so close to you. I'm seen through. No, I'm not innocent like you. Oh God, I'm sorry. She's not apologizing for sin. She's apologizing for not being innocent like God. When I woke up, the same thing happened to me. I was able to see the difference between my own ideas of right and wrong and the things that how I thought life should be, and to accept the structure of reality that I was living in. I wasn't married to a good man who sometimes did bad things. That's the structure we all want to live in, right? I was married to evil, a wolf that pretends to be a sheep. So, on to the strategies and games that are probably being played in your own home. Game one is like a strategy of observation. He never initiates because he's always kind of waiting to see what happens. This strategy is evergreen and ongoing. What I mean by that is that it's always happening. He's always doing recon work. And you've inadvertently set yourself up for this game, unfortunately. He was creating an agreement with you, a silent and unwritten kind of contract. You just didn't realize it. In the beginning, you didn't ask him questions like, what are you looking for in a relationship? Or what's your idea of a partner? Or what's your idea of a relationship? Or what's your vision for us as a couple? You didn't ask the questions overtly or have a conversation because you were never taught that you could. Just think about that for a second. He's doing recon on you. Evil has been studying you, but you weren't raised to vet masculinity through your femininity, and it has put you at a huge disadvantage. So it feels awkward to form those kinds of questions in your mouth, and it feels wrong for even thinking them. It seems like you should just know, and it seemed like you had the same idea for what marriage would look like in the future, because he was mirroring your own thoughts, your own ideas, wishes, and desires back to you. All the communication and interpersonal exchanges, it all seemed transparent because you thought you were entering into your happily ever after. You had no choice but to agree with him. How could you not? You have so much in common in the beginning. It seemed like you were meant for each other. There was this romantic element that you brought into it, and it blinded you to the fact that you're entering into a nightmare, not a fairy tale. You weren't shrewd. No one taught you what it means to be a feminine warrior or how to be her. You were taught that modesty and being nice is all you need. In fact, they're still wrecking millions of lambs by telling them the same useless, dangerous information. Jesus tells us we're going into an evil world where we're going to fight the kingdom of darkness. And Christendom arms females with a water pistol that smiles nicely and squirts lots of pleases and thank yous. And they expect her to be a warrior. All the while, evil is doing his due diligence. He was dating you for data, vetting and testing through all your vulnerabilities. He was strategically unguarded, and that led you to believe that you were getting to know a real person. That's how he tricked you. But now, after you're married, what's emerged is less like a shared vision of two people on a joint venture with a common goal. Instead, it's a one-sided venture with you doing all the relational heavy lifting that God created him to do. Lack of planning, nominal interest, and little to no amount of initiation or intentional effort into the marriage relationship. Instead, he leans heavily into hobbies, functions, and activities that are mostly done alone. Things requiring no interactions from you, the kids, or other people. That word alone is important because in Genesis 2, God said it's not good that man is alone. You feel like you're married to a person who's single. That's why it seems like you're a couple, but you feel lonely. He enjoys all the benefits of marriage with none of the responsibility. You and your kids are a movie set that he can walk into and play act after work. It's all rehearsed lines and roles being played out. You can feel the familiar patterns, and they feel sickly. There's only two possibilities. He doesn't realize his lack of headship and immature relationship skills are disobedience to God, and they're hurting you. Or he does, and it's all intentional. You've got to decide what's best for you. You can continue to communicate more, staying engaged in the game he's playing, revealing more and more about yourself, more communication that's rewarding his strategy of recon. Or you can stop talking about the same thing, which is actually nagging. That's another video. I don't want to get into that right now. So stop talking and instead start making clear statements about what you need. Requests that are clear, simple, and point of fact with no explanation. This is key. No explanation. It's not a conversation. Not at this point. You're merely giving him information so that he can self-correct, and you're giving him the space in which to do that if he chooses. Let him set the course for his own self-correction. As the head, this is healthy masculinity. He'll rise to the challenge of collaboration with your femininity as he embraces his masculinity for healthy relationship, like God says in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 3 and verse 33, and Ephesians 5:28. Or he won't, and more darkness will emerge as you experience more ambiguity, confusion, and frustration. Here's the part where I got lost. I was continually blinded because I thought the role of wife was femininity, but it's not. Submission is a practice you do. It's a discipline to keep the house functioning as you move through conflict in relationship. And that's it. Submission is not special to marriage. It's how all organizational structures operate here on earth. Submission in marriage merely keeps the gears turning within the functional roles. There's nothing special about the roles in marriage. Anyone can do it. There's no relationship required for function to happen. You can outsource every single domestic function, and you can outsource provision as well. Just ask a single mom how much the government provides for her. But you cannot outsource the relationship between a man and a woman. When there's a conflict between the two of you, that's what's affected by sin, not the functional roles. And if there's no relationship being initiated by the head, as the body, you have to stop pretending that there is. If there's no relationship being healed because of his sin towards you in disobedience, stop pretending he's repented. You cannot mirror in relationship if there's nothing to receive and mirror. It's humanly impossible to be the feminine neged from Genesis 2 if there's nothing in front of you from masculinity. Allow the break in relationship that the man has created. That is what you reflect. And don't do his work for him. If he's a healthy man, healthy but difficult and dysfunctional, that means he's not skilled and he needs to figure it out. Give him the love, grace, and compassion and space to do that, because he will. In her book, The Female Brain, Luann Brisdendine said that males co-create themselves. When God has destined the sex of a person at their conception, and that person is going to be a female, she just continues to receive God's growing of her body exactly the way she is. But if she's going to be a male, then something really cool happens. The unborn person's testosterone increases and he consumes the female parts, making himself all male. God doesn't do it for him. The baby does it himself. I put a link in the description box for the book if you want to study her research a little further. So don't emasculate him by offering any help or suggestions or encouragement. If a man wants your help, he'll ask. Don't drop little hints or ask seemingly little innocent questions thinking you're being slick. Just because he's unskilled with a feminine heart, it doesn't mean he's stupid or unintelligent. He just happens to be clueless when it comes to you. A healthy guy doesn't want to be coached or parented by his wife. If he wants to hear more about making your request happen, he'll ask you. If you shared a request and he's still responding with a vague or ambiguous or contradictory effect or baiting in any way around the subject of your request, let it be what you feel and accept the reality of the experience. Stop being conspicuous or drawing attention to yourself. You do this by understanding and practicing grace and discretion. You simply and quietly increase your time with other friendships in your life. Or, in the case of extreme isolation, develop your hobbies and skills that build your feminine heart, mind, and soul. Invest with other people if you can, those who share your visions and dreams and desires. You'll have the space and the freedom to do that because you've assumed the best in him, like 1 Corinthians 13 tells us, and you've given him the space and the freedom to fulfill it. God gave me a love for teaching, writing, photography, sewing, and music, but I hadn't cultivated any of that for me. I had been conditioned. And just to be clear, when I say conditioned, what I really mean is coerced to cultivate only what benefited Dean. An example of this was during my homeschooling of the kids. I wanted to slowly work on my teaching degree part-time so that when I was finished teaching the kids, I could lateral into teaching outside the home. He said he wouldn't do any of the housework or take care of the kids while I was at school part-time. I agreed, even though it was unfair, and things seemed settled. Then, out of the blue, there was this huge fight about money. He said that I had to choose my part-time school or the kids because homeschooling was taking all of our money, which it wasn't. By this time, I was creating my own curriculum, so I only spent about $100 a year of the house money on supplies. I used mostly my own allowance. And for clarity's sake, we weren't poor. He was in middle management by this time and was making well over $75,000. He just was keeping all of it for himself. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have the internet or cable or a new car. So my first step was to take back all that ground that I had given up during those years. All those gifts, skills, and talents that God put inside me. I had to begin to responsibly steward them. I had to do it for me, but also for Him, because it's Him that's the owner of all of those skills and talents. Matthew 25. What do you love to do? What lights you up? You've got to make a move in that direction, no matter how small. Now, admittedly, I did it wrong. I did it in anger and frustration. I believed He was supposed to do it. So my thinking was, well, if He's not going to build into me, then I guess I'll just have to do it myself. This is wrong and right. It was right for me to be responsible for my own likes and desires. I just had the wrong attitude. A man doesn't owe you anything to that end. It's a choice a healthy male makes as he learns about himself from being in relationship with you. A man joins you in building yourself. He increases your talents and skills. You train a husband how to treat you because he watches how you treat yourself. A healthy husband, that is. With a toxic man, he pretends to build into you, but then it's used against you. I started to teach myself photography, and it was great at first. Then it was used against me, slowly. I was conditioned to only go and take pictures when he was around. It got to the point where if I went out any time at all while he was at work, he acted like I intentionally waited for him to go to work. And it caused more and more and more fights. He used my God-given gift against me instead of celebrating it and building into me. The sliver of time enters here. That space of awkwardness between verse 1 and 2 from 1 Peter 3. I had quoted what Viktor Frankl said about the space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies our freedom and growth. In the same way, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that, even if some disobey the word, they may be won over without a word by the way their wives live. Here's your sliver of time, when they observe your pure, reverent lives. This is where you sit. This is where you grow and cultivate your responsibility of stewardship for you. My gift of photography was about me and God. Dean made it about himself. My lack of stewardship made me irresponsible with my own gifts and talents. It is hard and feels awkward. In the beginning, it's going to feel like pins and needles sticking into you. You'll feel compelled to ease that emotional pain that you can actually feel in your physical body. It hurts because growth hurts. This is important to get, really important. In 1 Peter 3, when God says, they may be won over by the way you live, the man is not the reason or the hoped for outcome. The man is not the purpose for the way you live your life. The man is not the goal. The man is the beneficiary of your training, if he chooses it. The sliver of time, right? It takes practice to love yourself. That's what you're doing in that sliver of time. You're learning to advocate for you through self-care and stewardship. You cultivate you. He can take it or leave it, but you're done with wrongly pleasing him. Wanting your husband to be pleased with you is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's totally different than you living to please him. This will be hard because if you're an unhealed HSP who's living inside of hidden abuse, you've probably been isolated from all the people and things you love. But more importantly, you've been isolated from the things you love about you, your talents from God. You'll have to continue the arduous journey of that discovery, healing, and then rebuilding. It doesn't matter if that sliver of space can only accommodate 5 minutes of your talent development. Next time, it will be 10 minutes. And eventually, as this sliver of space enlarges, a beautiful thing happens. You'll become the feminine creature that God created you to be. Let the man go his way in his sin. Verses 1 and 2. Take your focus off the marriage and make an intentional shift to focus on yourself. Verses 2 and 3. The intentional stewardship of you. Verse 4. For God. Verse 5 and 6. Discretion, grace, and presence. Make it happen. You know why I can say continue and not start? Because, my lovely, just by being curious and searching and asking, you've already begun your journey by taking responsibility for your own emotions. That's healing. You are brave to let yourself see it inside you, courageous to accept it and speak it out. Congratulations. Another game the wolf plays. Well, there's many. I'm just focusing on 2 right now. The other game is extreme intensities like hot and cold. This messes with your mind and your body's natural rhythms. It scrambles your internal feminine compass to point to south as your authentic self instead of true north. This is a trauma bond. It's how he emotionally glued himself to you. I've got to make a noise here because that's how I feel when I say it. Ugh. You experience fireworks and a profound level of connection, or at least you think it's connection. There's a visceral feeling of excitement caused by sparks in your belly region. We mistake this feeling as butterflies. In the beginning, that's how you know you are accepting the fake romance, the fairy tale. But then afterwards, the intensity disappears to that bare minimum effort in his actions with you. Despite intentional, super strong interest in you, like off the charts interest, he's dwindled his investments to nothing again. Like the tide that has come in deep and strong and then ebbs back to nothing, leaving the sand to dry out. A wolf is trying to keep you emotionally and physically addicted through the back and forth emotions of everything then nothing. The reason he can do that in the first place is because there is an empty spot inside your heart that needs healing because it's always empty. So this strategy can be employed against you ad nauseum. Now, you'd think the solution is for him to stop hurting you so that you don't hurt, right? That if you could just get him to see what's happening and how much he's hurting you, he'd stop. You assume he's orienting from the same position as you, ignorance or woundedness, and if he knows the truth, things would get better. He's not. Your default is God. His is not. He does know exactly what he's doing. He's not a healthy husband who made a bad choice and sinned against you because he's emotionally bruised or broken or wounded. He's an evil man, intentionally choosing to hurt you. That's why the solution is within you. It has nothing to do with him. You've got to ask yourself why this connection feels so good in the first place. Why do you need his connection so desperately? Why am I depending on another person to do this for me? Man, a healthy man will add to your life, not make it possible for you to live your life. That's your job, you and God. That void you feel is where you'll discover the talents that God originally placed inside you. The talents that are your particular bent. I talk about what your bent is and where it was supposed to come from in the video I called Authentic Femininity Part 2. I'll put the link for that in the iCards. The thing you've got to understand is that the wolf didn't create the space for the trauma bond to exist. that void was already there inside you. A predator just sees the void and knows how to maneuver his trauma bond into it. That void in you is empty, right? It's a lack. It's an unmet need, not a want or a desire. It's an unfulfilled female creature need. You've had it for a long time. That's why when any kind of attention is dropped into it, it feels good inside you. Even if that attention is from someone like a wolf, it still feels good. You just didn't know that this particular fill-up of attention that you are receiving and enjoying like a piece of yummy chocolate cake is part of a game he's playing. Let's say you've been walking in the desert for 5 days, no water or food, and you finally see someone walking towards you with a tray of food and a pitcher of ice cold water. Wouldn't you accept? You're not focusing on the person. You're focusing on the thing that you need. You're about to die, right? You need food and water. The thing you need so desperately and have never had is being handed to you by Charles Manson. But to you, and that's key, to you, what he's offering makes him look like the hero Ethan Hunt from Mission Impossible. It's the past deprivation of the exact substance that you needed to survive. That is what is making you blind and stuck. The unmet need is the very thing that's blinding you to the reality of the truth of the giver of that sustenance. The wolf doesn't make you blind or gullible. He just recognizes the person wandering and stumbling who is in desperate need of it. So the sustenance that's normal for every female is going to be used against you as bait. It isn't your fault. We were created for connection, but somehow, for whatever reason, that's missing inside of you. The fact that you're trapped by his trauma bond is the proof of it. So the hard part is that even though it's not your fault, it's going to be your responsibility to fix. The beginning of taking that responsibility is to direct your energy inwards. So you take your focus off whatever it is that he's offering or whatever it is that you want to receive from him that you thought you were going to be receiving, and instead see where it's not landing inside you. We get so focused on getting that void filled in. You've been focusing on the wrong thing. You've been focusing on your husband, making it his responsibility to fill that void. It's not his responsibility to fill it or heal it. But that's what we try and do. By allowing that sliver of time to emerge, you get to see where the void is inside you. You'll be able to feel it because your husband won't be part of that equation anymore. Discretion and grace actually hold that space open for you. When your heart begins to heal, you can enjoy the attention from a man without needing it. That's the key. Femininity wants to be seen by masculinity. That's normal and healthy. It's a need by design. Being seen means your healed heart enjoys connection from him. And that's very different than starving for affection and needing desperately to be seen so you can feel alive, craving to be validated to feel worthy. Feminine power has the responsibility to set the pace in the relationship with masculinity. Pacing is like boundaries, but in these boundaries that are specifically for any kind of male-female relationship, but moreover for a romantic relationship that seems to be in crisis all the time. Pacing sets you up to live in the present for you, being present for yourself first before anyone else. You've got to take care of you first, otherwise you cannot love others. That's why God says to love others as you love yourself. Healing You is how you love yourself. I spoke about femininity possessing the unique ability to be present and remote at the same time. Pacing is the speed that it happens at. Pacing is how discretion and grace come to life and grow inside you in that sliver of time. All right, you know how a toxic man tricks you in the beginning with speed, high intensity pressure and speed. That's the love bombing. In the beginning, you didn't pace, and that's how you got trapped. You didn't understand that you could or that you should pace the relationship, but you can do it now. It's never too late. It doesn't matter how long you've traveled in the wrong direction. You can always turn around and live appropriately for God. It doesn't matter if you've been married for 5 years or 32. Pacing means there's less intensity of hot and cold. You literally put your life in slow motion so that you can see the drama before it starts. It dials down the frenetic energy that's been surrounding you because you're living in a trauma bond. You know what frenetic energy feels like? It's the butterflies you feel that you think are good and exciting. When you slow everything down, you get to evaluate everything because now you can see everything. People say an out-of-body experience, and that, I'm guessing, is sort of what people are describing. I think they're talking about the feeling of a sensation. Because when I learned this kind of pacing, it was actually not an out-of-body experience, but rather being completely and fully present inside my body. It's heightened awareness. When I was taking line dancing, I needed to slow the video way down so that I could not only see at a slower rate, but you can also, if you know the basic step, you can anticipate the next move. In being married to a dangerous man, you do know the next move because you've experienced the same pattern for years. You just didn't know it as a pattern because of the speed of the conflict. So think of pacing that way. You can slow it down as much as you want, or you can even pause. It's whatever you need. Just remember, it will feel awkward, but let it happen because it's what you need. Pacing creates the space for you to begin to make new patterns in your life for you. The traditional Christian teaching about marriage and the masculine interpretation of 1 Peter 3 is about the wife bearing the responsibility of the marriage to make the man a better husband. The man is the one who has sinned. He's the one who has disobeyed. But that disobedient man is going to get turned around through her behaviors and actions. See, they've made the outcome of whether he stops sinning or not dependent on her behaviors and actions as her role in wifery. They've made the man center stage by interpreting him as the main subject. Peter's actually talking to wives about themselves. His discourse has nothing to do with a disobedient husband. When you interpret 1 Peter 3 as a feminine embodied creature, you'll understand that Peter's instructing us wives how to live your life outside the roles in marriage while staying married to your husband who is at his worst at this moment. Or if you discover he's a wolf when you thought he was a sheep. Closing thoughts. First, shh. Don't say a word about this to him. Discovering that your husband's dangerous is a scary place to end up. It's never where you thought you'd be, and it feels like an unreality. But your silence about your awareness of what he really is, that's your safety zone. And always remember, a clueless guy that causes dysfunction and seems difficult, he's not dangerous.